The sound of an expensive bottle of champagne shattering against the stone floor did not frighten me as much as the manic look in Savannah's eyes, my own biological sister. In the middle of Magnolia Hall's garden, flooded with white flowers and pastel dresses, she screamed that my black wheelchair looked like a stain, ruining her perfect engagement photo. Then, before I could even process what was happening, she shoved me straight into the tower of crystal glasses. Wine exploded everywhere, blood mixed with champagne, spreading across the cold stone ground. I could not stand up. My legs would not respond. But Savannah had made a fatal mistake. She did not know that the woman who had just crossed the lawn and knelt down to stabilize my neck with precise, professional movements was Dr. Helen Prescott, the groom's aunt, and the chief of neurosurgery at Emory. She was also the very person who had placed the stabilizing screws in my spine at levels T10 to T11 24 months earlier. This time, she was not holding a scalpel. She was calling the law. But wait. To understand how a biological sister could be so cruel, I need to take you back 1 hour earlier, to the moment the iron gates of Magnolia Hall first opened. Where are you watching this story from? And at what time? I want to know that you are here with me. Everything looked too perfect, and that was exactly what made me uneasy. The black iron gates of Magnolia Hall opened slowly. Metal brushed against metal, releasing a dull, dry sound, like a warning. The garden unfolded before me, breathtakingly beautiful. White magnolia flowers arranged into arches, pastel ribbons wrapped around ancient stone columns. A string quartet played softly expensive, polished, perfect to the point of emotional emptiness. I took a deep breath. The air was humid, layered with the scent of freshly cut grass and sun-warmed flowers. Beautiful, but cold. I told myself I was here only to congratulate her, not to cause trouble, not to make anyone uncomfortable. The wheels slowed as I passed through the gate, and in that exact moment, something tightened in my chest. The invitation had been clear, written in elaborate italic script, spring pastel only. I had complied. The pale pink silk dress fell gently over my thighs, covering the part of my body I no longer controlled. My hair was styled in soft waves, lipstick kept light. Every detail had been chosen so I would not become a problem. There was only one thing I could not change: the matte black carbon fiber wheelchair. It did not sparkle. It did not blend in. But it was my freedom. Lightweight, agile. It allowed me to move without asking anyone for permission. I used to think color did not matter. That family would understand. That thought dissolved as I felt the glances slide past me. Quick, subtle, evaluating. Savannah's smile always arrives before trouble. She stood near the fountain, an ivory dress hugging her figure. Everything about her had been calculated. Grant stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back. Gentle eyes, trusting. When Savannah saw me, her smile curved just enough, not too little, not too much. Her gaze dropped to my wheelchair for a fraction of a second, then lifted away, as if she had never seen it at all. I rolled closer. My heart raced. 2 years of silence had not been enough to kill one foolish hope that today, at least, she would be kind. I lifted the gift box. In my mind, I rehearsed a simple greeting. No stumbling. Before I could speak, Savannah tilted her head. She leaned close to a server's ear. Her eyes flicked toward me. This time, she did not hide it. She nodded, very slightly. The server turned away. In his hands was a pristine white tablecloth. My heart sank. Something had already been arranged. I gripped the rim of my wheel, telling myself not to overthink it. But when Savannah turned back, the smile was still there, only sharper. And in that moment, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. That perfect photograph had no place for me. Some accidents do not take your life, they take the truth. Before the night the car flew off that curve, I was still whole. Not wealthy, not remarkable, but enough to stand on my own 2 feet. I lived in Savannah, a city beautiful in an old, ceremonial way, where everything is wrapped in etiquette and properly timed smiles. Savannah Mercer. My sister was always the center. Every party revolved around her. Every story did too. And I, Caroline Mercer, was the one who cleaned up after her whenever she broke something. My parents called it giving way. I called it a habit. That night, Savannah said she wanted to drive me home after the party. She smiled. Generous. Exactly the kind of smile everyone trusted. I got into the passenger seat, not knowing that it would be the last time I ever felt my feet resting on the floor of a car. The moment I realized there was danger came later than I expected. The suburban road in Georgia that night was empty. Streetlights grew farther apart. The air carried the scent of damp soil and tree resin. Savannah drove fast, one hand on the steering wheel, the other holding her phone. Blue light reflected across her face. Messages kept coming in. I told her to watch the road. She nodded, but her eyes never left the screen. The curve appeared suddenly. I felt the tires tremble lightly at first, then harder. Savannah. I did not finish the sentence. The steering wheel jerked. The car slid off the road. Everything exploded into 1 second of chaos. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. The vehicle spun. I did not scream. I only felt a violent impact, and then my entire body fell into emptiness. When the car finally stopped, the silence was terrifying. I called her name. No answer. Only the sound of a phone falling onto the car floor. The screen still glowing. A message left unfinished. I do not know, even now, who truly lost control of the wheel. There are awakenings that are not meant to continue living, but to teach you how to stay silent. I woke up surrounded by the sharp smell of antiseptic. White lights hung low from the intensive care ceiling. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I tried to move. There was no response. No pain. No numbness. Just emptiness. Dr. Helen Prescott stood beside the bed. She was still in surgical attire. Her eyes were tired, but focused. She spoke slowly, very slowly, as if each word carried weight. Spinal injury at the level of T10 to T11. We stabilized it with screws. You are alive. A very brief pause, but long enough for me to understand the rest. She did not say forever, but her eyes did. Across the room, Savannah was crying, crying steadily, crying beautifully, not breaking, like a performance she had rehearsed for a long time. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. There are tears that are not meant for the person lying in the hospital bed. My parents arrived shortly after, well-dressed, serious expressions. No one asked if I was in pain. No one asked if I was afraid. They talked about the accident, about a misunderstanding, about how everything should not be made bigger than it was. My father spoke in a low, calm voice, as if discussing business. Caroline, you understand. Outsiders do not need to know the whole truth. My mother held my hand, very tightly, too tightly. Savannah is about to get engaged. Our family cannot survive a scandal. You are the stronger one. I looked at them, waiting for a question, a hesitation. There was none. Only a faint sense of relief, as if they had already made the hardest decision before stepping into that room. They needed me to say that I was the one driving. Some lies are given the name sacrifice. Savannah did not object. She only looked at me with an expression that was both relieved and guarded. The next day, the news story began to spread that I had been driving too fast, that I had been distracted, that Savannah had tried to stop me. Every time I opened my mouth, people looked at me as if I were making things complicated. And so, I went silent. Not because I believed that story, but because I understood something else. My truth had no place in this family. From that moment on, I began learning a new skill, not forgiveness, not endurance, but how to make my own existence just faint enough that it would no longer make anyone uncomfortable. I did not know then how long that silence would follow me. There are rooms without locked doors, and yet you still cannot leave. Night falls very slowly in the intensive care room. The hallway lights spill through the crack beneath the door, thin and cold, like an artificial layer of mist. I stare at the ceiling. Strips of light glide across it, then stop. I try to move my toes. Nothing responds. No pain, no numbness, just a strange emptiness, as if the lower half of my body has been placed somewhere else entirely. The heart monitor keeps its steady rhythm. Each beep reminds me that I am still alive, but living no longer feels the way it used to. I close my eyes, then open them again. The room is still there. This body is still lying here, but it feels as though I am only borrowing it for a while. A nurse's cart rolls down the hallway, soft, even. Someone laughs quietly in the next room. A whispered goodnight, a door gently closing. Out there, life continues to run smoothly. Savannah still has a wedding to prepare for. My parents still have calls to return, stories that need arranging so everything appears settled. And me, I lie here, like a folded note set off to the side. I suddenly remember the afternoon before the accident. Sunlight slanting through the trees, my legs steady on the sidewalk. Such an ordinary sensation, now turned into a luxury. The wall clock ticks forward another beat, slow, precise. Time does not stop to wait for anyone. It simply moves on in silence. I used to think silence was a way to keep the peace, a way not to make anyone uncomfortable, a way to keep things from breaking apart. But in this room, silence sounds different. It is heavy, and it lingers. It does not bring peace. It only conceals the things no one wants to face. I lie still, not because I have accepted it, but because I do not yet know what other choice I have. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a thought begins to form. Perhaps silence is not the end. Perhaps it is only the necessary pause before something finally has to be spoken. I thought I had survived the fall, but that was only the easiest part. The waiting room behind the Magnolia Hall garden was colder than I expected. The air conditioning ran steadily. No noise, no draft, only silence, thick and heavy. I was wheeled in there after receiving first aid. The door closed. The lock clicked softly but loud enough for me to hear. Savannah stood leaning against the vanity table, her back straight, arms crossed over her chest. Her face no longer showed panic, only control. My mother sat on the sofa, both hands gripping her handbag tightly. My father stood near the window, looking outside but not truly seeing anything. No one asked if I was in pain. No one asked if I was afraid. Savannah was the one who broke the silence. "You took things too far," she said, her voice calm, as if I were the one causing trouble. I looked down at my hands. The blood had already dried between layers of bandage. A burning sting spread with every breath. And suddenly, I understood the real confrontation had only just begun. They did not apologize. They began to negotiate. You know. Savannah stepped closer, bending down until she was level with my eyes. "No one wants this to turn into a scandal." My mother nodded immediately. You know, today is an important day for your sister. My father sighed, as if he were the most exhausted person in the room. Savannah continued. All you have to say is that it was an accident, that you slipped, that I was only trying to help you stand up. I looked up, straight into her eyes. You pulled me, I said slowly, in front of everyone. Savannah let out a soft laugh, not amused, not angry. No one saw it clearly. She replied, You're sitting too low. That sentence stabbed straight into my chest. My mother placed her hand on my shoulder, the pressure heavier than necessary. Please think about the family, she said. If the police get involved, our reputation will. I cut her off. Reputation is more important than the truth. No one answered. That silence was the answer. They set conditions and called it family. Savannah straightened her posture, her voice lowered. If you cooperate, she said, everything will stop here. I felt my mother's grip tighten on my hand. If you don't, my father spoke for the first time, you will bear the consequences yourself. I lifted my head. My heart pounded. What consequences? Savannah tilted her head, her gaze cold. You will no longer receive support from the family. No one will stand by you. And you know how hard it is to live alone in that condition. Each word, one by one. No shouting, no raised threats, just a naked truth. They thought I was weak, and they planned to use that to break me. I took a deep breath, looked up at each person in the room, and for the first time in many years, I did not nod. If you are watching up to this point, please comment the number 1 so I can send my thanks to you and continue the story. The door opened, and the room changed hands. There was no warning. No one called out a name, just a very brief pause. And then the door behind the garden opened. The woman who entered did not rush. Low-heeled shoes, steady steps. Her eyes did not sweep the room searching for attention. And yet, everyone looked at her. Dr. Helen Prescott. A simple, cream-colored suit, no showy jewelry, silver hair neatly pinned at the nape of her neck. On her face, the familiar focus of someone accustomed to moments between life and death. She stopped when she saw me. No questions. No hesitation. She knelt immediately beside the wheelchair, both hands placed on my shoulders firm, precise, as if she had done this hundreds of times before. I felt the exact pressure at my neck, the correct position that needed stabilization. Don't move, she said, her voice low, clear, not open to debate. The air in the room shifted, whispers faded. The music drifting from the distant party suddenly felt out of place. Savannah stood frozen. The polite smile on her lips had not yet disappeared, but her eyes were wavering. My father stepped forward half a pace, then stopped. My mother opened her mouth. No sound came out. Dr. Prescott lifted her head. Her gaze passed over each person very quickly, but long enough for them to understand. Call an ambulance, she said, and call the police. No one asked why, because the way she said it did not sound like a suggestion. One sentence, and the entire story flipped. Dr. Helen Prescott did not remove her hands from my neck. She lifted her head and looked straight at Savannah. You said this was an accident. Her voice was even, not loud, not sharp, but the entire room fell silent. Savannah opened her mouth, then closed it again. We were just taking photos, she said. She lost her balance. Dr. Prescott nodded slightly, as if she had heard that line many times in her life. She does not have the ability to maintain her own balance, she said. Injury at T10 to T11. complete paralysis of the lower body. She turned her gaze to my parents. I performed that surgery myself, she continued. 8 screws stabilizing the spine. The records are intact at Emory. No one contradicted her. A slip and fall, she went on, does not create lateral traction force. She demonstrated with a very small motion of her hand. But this, she paused, is a pulling force. Savannah took half a step back. You can't. I can. Dr. Prescott cut in. And I just did. She turned toward Andrew. Her gaze rested on him a beat longer. She needs cervical protection immediately, she said. And this incident must be documented as an assault. The direction of the stares began to change. They were no longer looking at me. They were looking at Savannah. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood the old story was dead. When the truth stands in the middle of a crowd, no one can shield anyone anymore. No one spoke right away. But the room was no longer still. A chair scraped softly. A sharp breath was held back. Several glances darted, then stopped on Savannah. Andrew stood one step away from her. A small distance, but unmistakable. He looked at Dr. Prescott, then at me. His eyes no longer held confusion, only a truth assembling itself piece by piece. Savannah, he said quietly. Just one word. But she flinched. You're believing her, Savannah snapped back, her voice half an octave higher. I told you. It was just an accident. You didn't answer the question. Andrew cut in, his voice low, slow. Did you pull her? Savannah turned toward my mother, then my father, searching. No one stepped forward. She was emotional. My mother said, not looking at Andrew, this situation stop, Dr. Prescott said, not loudly, but enough to silence everyone. She stood upright, her gaze swept the room, one face at a time. There are witnesses, she said. There are traction marks, and there are medical records. A woman at the back of the room whispered something. Another shook her head. Someone raised a phone, then lowered it when they met Dr. Prescott's eyes. Savannah backed away. Her heels slid slightly on the stone floor. No, she said quickly. That's not what happened. The door burst open, and a voice from outside called in. Excuse me, who called the police? No verdict was needed. The crowd delivered it on its own. No one declared anything. There was no loud commotion, only very small movements, but enough for me to know that everything had shifted. One person turned away, pretending to take a phone call. Another stepped back half a pace, as if standing too close might cause trouble. The quiet circles of conversation that had once formed around Savannah began to crack, warp, then dissolve. A few phones appeared, not raised high, not secretly recording, just held low, the glow of screens lighting faces that had grown serious. Messages were read quickly, eyes flicked toward me, then settled on Savannah. The music outside in the garden continued, the piano steady, smooth, elegant. But this room had fallen out of rhythm. Andrew unfastened the top button of his jacket, took a deep breath, then stepped slightly away from Savannah. No argument, no explanation needed. The space between them was not large, but it was clear enough for everyone to understand. Savannah tried to hold on to her smile. She nodded at an acquaintance. The smile fell before it could be returned. I recognized a cold truth. The crowd did not need more evidence. They only needed a safe reason to turn their backs. When the crowd falls silent, family has nowhere left to hide. My father stood in the middle of the room, his arms hanging at his sides, his face tight, as if waiting for a familiar cue. He looked at Savannah, then at me. No one was making the decision for him anymore. My mother stepped forward half a pace, then stopped. Her hand trembled slightly before tightening around her handbag strap. "We should leave," she said, her voice low, not looking at anyone. Savannah turned to her. A flicker of pleading crossed her eyes, then vanished. Savannah began. Her voice broke. "I didn't mean to," no one interrupted her. And no one finished the sentence for her. This silence was different from before. Not the silence that protects, but the silence of people who no longer dare to stand beside you. My father turned away first, a decision made too late. But late was enough for everyone to see clearly that family was no longer a single unit. Savannah remained where she was, alone. No one standing in front of her anymore. No one speaking on her behalf. Only the truth and the empty space around her. There are moments when standing still is power. I said nothing. I did not explain. I did not defend myself. I did not try to convince anyone. Dr. Prescott stood slightly behind my shoulder, not touching me. No need. Her presence was enough. I took a deep breath. The air was cool, dry. The scent of white flowers had faded now, as if the room itself were drawing back its breath. For the first time that evening, I did not need to balance anyone else's emotions. I did not need to soothe anyone. I did not need permission to exist. Savannah looked at me, anger mixed with confusion, as if she were waiting for me to say something, something to cling to argue against, to shift the blame. I did not give her that. My silence was not surrender. It was a boundary. And in that quiet space, I understood with absolute clarity every consequence from this moment forward no longer belonged to me. The room is so quiet that I can hear my own breathing. Afternoon light settles slowly across the floor, not harsh, not glaring. There are no more voices whispering, no cameras, no one deciding things on my behalf. The black wheelchair stands beside the window, neat and composed. It does not block anything. It is there as part of me, without needing permission. I sit still, my back resting against the chair, letting the sense of safety return. Not because everything is fine, but because I no longer have to stay on guard. I think about the years that have passed, mornings that began with the fear of bothering others, parties where I stood at the edges, pretending I was fine, moments when I stayed silent so someone else could remain comfortable. I lost many things: a body that once moved freely, a dream that once felt within reach, a family in the truest sense of the word. But I realized something else. I never lost my voice. I only put it away for far too long. And today, I do not need to shout to be heard. I do not call Savannah. I do not send a message. I do not check in, not because I hate her, but because I no longer have an obligation to explain myself. I do not call my parents either. This silence is not punishment. It is a boundary. A boundary I should have had long ago. I accept that there are people who cannot change, and that walking away does not make me cruel. It makes me honest. Honest about my pain. Honest about the life I want to rebuild. I stand no. I sit in my own decision. No one pulls me in another direction. No one asks me to sacrifice myself one more time. This feeling is not loud. It is quiet, but steady. I look out the window, where the city continues on. Life does not stop for my tragedy. And this time, I am no longer standing outside of it. I do not need to win. I only need the right to choose my next path. Not every story ends in victory. Some stories close with peace. That morning, I woke up early. The room was filled with gentle sunlight. No one knocked on the door. No phone vibrated. The wheelchair stood beside the table, neat and orderly. I brewed tea, watching the steam rise slowly. Outside, the city began to move. Cars rolled by. Pedestrians hurried past. Life went on, without requiring me to explain anything. I recognized this feeling. It was not radiant happiness. It was safety. A kind of safety that comes from no longer fearing being pulled backward. I used to think peace was something you had to search for, fight for, prove you deserved. But it turns out, peace is what remains when you stop trying to be accepted. I did not defeat anyone in this story. I simply chose not to lose myself one more time. Family is not always a safe place, and boundaries are not walls. They are how we protect the most decent parts of ourselves. I learned to live more slowly. I learned to choose silence when needed. I learned to leave at the right moment, not to run away, but to truly begin again. If you are listening to this story and see a reflection of yourself in it, if you have ever been overlooked, if you have ever been asked to sacrifice so others could feel at ease, I want you to know this. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not weak for setting boundaries. Sometimes, the bravest thing is not staying. It is leaving. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If it resonated with you, please leave a comment. Share where you are watching from and what time of day it is. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can share more meaningful and valuable stories with you in life. See you in the next story.